When I was young, we lived on a farm that was in a remote part of the countryside. Whilst I lived there, I learned what fear really was. We lived in a farmhouse from when I was 3 years old until I was 6 years old. My great-grandmother, my nana, was living with us, and I still remember her well. She was very thin and frail and elderly. She had short, white hair, which reminded me of a fluffy cloud when I was young. But she always dragged around an oxygen tank, which always made a hissing noise. She was suffering from advanced emphysema from many years smoking cigarettes. She was always struggling to breathe, and her wheezing breath always seemed to echo around the house. It kind of scared me, as she looked like she was already dead, but somehow she was still walking around. One night my mother asked me if I'd go and sleep in my great-grandmother's room. She suspected that she might be having trouble sleeping. I crawled into bed with my nana, and I was getting ready to sleep. My great-grandmother had a particular hobby that she liked to do. She always played the card game Patience, and she always did this before going to sleep, as it made her feel very sleepy. Soon enough I was fast asleep, but that did not last for very long. There was some light pressure touching my hair. It brought me out of my slumber. It felt like someone was running their fingers through my hair. Thinking it was my great-grandmother, I didn't think much about it at the time, but soon I realised she was snoring. My great-grandmother was asleep. Who then was touching my hair? Reaching my hand up, I touched my hair and I felt it. There indeed was a hand there, and it felt cold. Ice cold. I screamed as loud as I could, and I leapt out of bed and I ran to my parents' room as fast as I could, screaming at them there was something touching my hair. They didn't believe me, thinking it was an overactive imagination or I was dreaming it. They told me to go back to bed and let them sleep. I decided that I was going to sleep in my room. There was no way in hell that I was going to sleep in my great-grandmother's room again. On my way back to the room, I saw my great-grandmother standing in the doorway, and she whispered, "He came for you, didn't he? Did he talk to you? If he didn't talk to you, then you are lucky. He talks to me every night, and he tells me I'm going to hell soon." This scared me even more. I wanted to run away and hide far from that room and her. He told me, "You have a delicious soul, and he wants to eat it. You better be careful, boy. He will have you." And with that, she turned around and shuffled back into her room. When she laid down, she looked up at me and she smiled. It was a weird smile that I'd never seen her do before. Suddenly the door slammed shut, stealing her into the night. I ran to my room and jumped in my bed. I pulled the covers over my head, and eventually I fell asleep. In the morning I heard my mother crying. Well, it wasn't really crying, she was wailing loudly. I'd never heard my mother cry until that morning. My great-grandmother had passed away during the night. She was found with her eyes wide open, in terror. For the next few days the house was quiet. There was somehow a somber mood all around. I'm sure my mother knew something was wrong at that time, but she could not figure out what it was. During this time, I could not walk past that room. I felt like there was something inside there, just waiting for me. Exactly 1 week after she passed away, everything started to lead me back to him. One night, I awoke, and in the dark, I could make out a dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. It was staring at me. Its eyes seemed to glow darker shade of black than the rest of its body, and I knew that those eyes were boring into me. Fear crept into every pore of my skin, settling into my bones. Pulling the blanket over my head, I was too scared to scream, so I hid there until the sun came up. Before the sun rose, I heard a voice in a very guttural tone. "See you tonight, my boy." And with that, the figure was gone, back from where he came from. That night, I did not want to sleep. I knew the man was coming back for me, and I didn't know what he wanted from me. But eventually I fell asleep. I was far too young to stay awake, and, as you might guess, was not allowed to drink coffee at 6 years of age. I remember dreaming that I was someplace dark, extremely dark, but I also felt very hot, and I was also quite wet as well. I couldn't figure out where I was. I reached out and I felt something metallic, which was hot to the touch. It felt like it burnt my hand. Then I started screaming, but no sound came out from my lips. The only thing that I could think was, "Oh God, please help me." From outside where I was trapped, I heard, "Don't say that filthy word in my presence, boy. He will not help you. You are mine." With those words, I woke up and I realized that I was in my bed. I was standing in a room. It took me a moment to realize where I was. Finally, my great-grandmother's bed came into view as my eyes adjusted. How did I get here? Did I sleepwalk into a room? Suddenly I realized that man had led me in here somehow and made me come into her room. Quickly I ran towards the door and I grabbed the handle. It was hot. It seared my hand. I shrieked out in pain. My mother came running into the room. She was panicked and she demanded to know why I was in that room. All I could do was cry. My hand was hurting and I was scared. I showed my mother my hand and she wanted to know how I burned it. So I told her, and she seemed to become even more panicked and desperate. She rushed me to the hospital to get it checked out. It turns out I had third-degree burns to my hand. After what seemed like forever in the hospital, it was time to leave. I didn't want to leave. I was too afraid to go back home. We got in the car and started driving. Finally, we arrived back home. My mother didn't say anything all the way back on the trip back. She was lost, deep in thought. Eventually, we pulled up in the front of the driveway, and we looked out at the front of the house. Then, we saw it. In the front window, there was a dark man standing there. He was looking through the window at us. I screamed at my mother. Surely she had to see the man at the window. He was staring at us. She stared at the house, and she stammered, "I can see it." With that, she slammed the car into gear, and we sped out of the driveway and into the night. I swear I could hear a loud scream coming from the house, like some sort of wild beast. I never went back to that house again. My mother dropped me at my cousin's house, and I stayed there until my family packed up and we moved to a different house. I do not know what happened to that house, or the man inside it, but to this day, I still have the mark in my hand, and it aches so very badly each time I look at it. This is my connection to that man, his brand that will forever, ever be etched into my skin. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my content, please like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like to hear more dark, scary tales, please let me know what you'd be interested in hearing. Leave a comment down below. And remember, always keep watching for what's in the dark.